G'day and welcome back to my channel. Now the Stingray has been going ahead in leaps and bounds. I have put a shot of primer on there because we had lowered that window, so I just thought I'd like to see what it looked like without all the bits of scratch work there, and I think that's going to look really nice. But the exciting stuff is, look what's happening with the interior. Look where I have got to now. Can you see that? We had done these little control boxes here in the previous video. So if you haven't seen that, go back and see those. There'll be a card up here on the screen. But what I've just completed this week is this little interior parts here. I've made these tiny little chairs which match as close as possible to the photos from the TV show. And I've created some yokes and a control panel I'm working on, or a center console I'm working on. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to make those chairs. Does that sound interesting? It's not as tricky as it looks. I mean, there's a bit to them. There's about a dozen pieces to them, but it's not that hard once you break it all down and do it in simple steps. And I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. Does that sound interesting? I hope so. Okay, roll the music. Now, how do we get to this from just using bits of plastic? Because that is all scratch. None of these parts in here can you buy in the stores, as far as I know. I've made everything out of tubes and rods and flat bits of plastic, and I've cut it all up and I've made all the things you've seen, and then they've been painted, of course. So, if you watch previous videos, you know I'm working off photos from the show. And there'll be a link to that website where I found all these photos from all the episodes, and that has been invaluable for me to figure things out. So to work out how these chairs are going to be, what I did is I first drew a diagram. So I actually copied off the images and I sort of drew this up in its very basic form. Like it's got a back with a bit of a sort of a tapered in top, and it's got armrests that go all the way around. It's got little side pieces. It's got a cushion, although I didn't end up putting that in the end. It's got a little kick thing here, little kick thing for the feet, and a little rest, and a grill in that. And then at the base here, it's got little drilled out things that it's got a little stand. So I needed to measure those dimensions, right? How tall is the seat? How wide is the seat? Okay. Luckily, there's lots of great photos here, but how do you work it out to the scale that you're doing? Now, I've talked about this before in previous videos. This photo is really good because it has known things on it. The back of the chairs are very close to this railing. So for all intents and purposes, dimensions are going to be relative. So if I know the width of that railing, I can work out all the rest. And in previous video, I'd already worked out the size of the things from photos. So I knew like the height of the railings. I knew things like that. So if you know one thing, you can extrapolate the rest. So knowing the height of the railing, I simply enlarged the photo until it was 10 times. Like it was a 7mm high railing, I got 70. And the width there, I think, was 8mm, I got 80. Once I've got that, I can start measuring things off. And it just so happened, the width of these chairs is 60. So that will be 6mm in the model I'm making, because I've made these pictures 10 times the size of what I'm making. Okay, so from that I can also calculate other things. I can work out that the height of the backrest here, okay, when I measure that up, it's around 77mm. Okay, and the top of it, how much does it taper in? All right, tapers into 23. That's about 2mm. See, I can work out all kinds of things. So how high is this bar here? Oh, there's a little bar, and that is just a shade off 60. That's 6mm. So this is what I did. I started working through all of these things, and I managed to calculate out all the sizes here. Okay, so I worked everything out. I 2mm wide at the back there. Okay, 4 and 3, that makes the 7 high for the seat. But this piece here, I know, I worked that out later on to be 6mm tall, and so on. You just start measuring things, and that's why it's handy to have a diagram and work out some elevations, because then you just start measuring things and writing them down, and once you've got enough, you can pretty well calculate the rest. All right, so with all of that information, I could then start making a cutting list. And so that's what the bottom part of this is. here's my cutting list. That's my backboard, okay, so that's the back of the seat. I'd need the stand at the bottom, all right. I'd need little side pieces that go underneath the armrests, and here are the armrests, and then this is the footrest and the kick plate for the footstool. I've got my plan, let's get on with it. Let's build this backrest first, and that's fairly easy because I'm going to use 0.5mm thick card here. I'm going to make something that's 7mm tall and it's 4mm wide. So we'll do the 7 first, and I love these little sort of caliper things. I can just measure off against my plastic. I've already got a right angle there, had cut before, so I just need my 4mm width, my 7mm height, and that's going to give me a rectangle that I can now make this out of. Easy as that. Now, being only 0.5mm thick plastic, it is really easy to cut, very easy. So just marking that off so I've got something to guide, and now using that edge I just lightly score with a very sharp knife, and I'll be through that like butter. Do we still have butter? Or margarine then. Margarine, or soy butter, whatever, cashew butter, whatever butter you got, something really soft. And there we go. So I've got that little rectangular piece. Now I've got a taper top of it, and I know that taper comes into 2mm. Right? So I know that if I measure 3 up, well, this is the height of the taper as well, okay. So I need 3mm up for this taper. So I measure that. It starts there, and it starts there, and I know it comes into 2. So I've only got to slice 1mm off each side. Like, things are really tiny here. So it's pretty easy to actually measure and just mark that. It's a fairly easy measurement. You can usually, once you've done a lot of this, you know what 1mm is. You sort of know how big it is. There we go. So that is, get your big fat hand out of the way, Harry. There we go. So just a matter of resting my blade on there and cut that away. So that should make my tapered top. And if you bug it up, you can just make another one till you get it right, or you can retrim. All right, there we go. That one is ready to go. Wasn't that easy? Let's move on. The base. Now, the base is 6mm wide, but it's 3mm high, and there are 4 parts to it, 4 sides to the base. So I'll make a big long strip here that's 3mm tall, and that way all the base pieces will be there, one next to each other, which will make it much easier to work with, as I'll show you in a sec. So yep, they're 6mm wide. So again, using my vernier, there we go, do a 6, and I'll measure off 4 lots of 6 here. You could just measure off 24 and then go through and divide it up. Either way, you've just got to get, allow for everything. If you've got a thick blade, you've got to allow for blade width, but we've got a very sharp blade. We're not going to have to worry about that at all. All right, there we go. That's all measured off. Just a matter now of, again, lining up with my rule. I use a metal rule here because you don't wreck it with the blade. If you use a plastic rule, well, you'll score holes in it. So cut that away. Fairly easy. And at the bottom here, that should just fall out, Harry. No, we'll bend it and it'll snap out. There we go. Don't you love plastic? You can bend and snap things. Okay, so what I need now is there's a little sort of arch there. And it's only seen at the back, but I made them all the way through because it seemed like a fun thing to do. So what I do is I use a big stiff knife and I just cut out a V. Okay? Now that V then, I'll use a half round file and I'll hold my piece in some little tweezers here and then lightly finish it off to get the shape as smooth as possible. Do the rest of them, and they're all easy to do there as a big long production line. What I need now is the base of our chair, and that's drawing some little invisible lines here. That sits inside those side pieces we've made. Now I'll need 1.5mm thick. That'll go to the top of the arch, and on either side I'll have to reduce it by 0.5mm of the plastic. So it was 6, the base, right? Take those 2 halves off, which is 1. My base will need to be 5mm square. So just cleaning up this plastic. Whenever you are going to do some work, make sure you start with a really clean edge. So I've already cut a line on this, so I know I've got a big square corner there, or a true corner. And then it's just a matter of getting out my really stiff knife, because this is not quite like butter. This takes a bit of, and they just, again, rip it out. Fortunately, that's left it a bit rough, so I'll now need to give that a bit of a sand and measure it up. Still a little bit too wide. All right, that's okay. I can adjust, and you do that a lot. Thicker the plastic, the more likely it's going to end up a little bit too big. That's okay, because you can always trim bits off. If you've made it too small, it's really hard to make it fat again. Let me tell you. Easy to make Harry fat, not easy to make those squares fat. So there we go, check that. 5mm, we got a base. Now I need to make these side pieces of my seat, and they're 5mm wide, so that's going to be fairly easy. But they're 2.5mm tall, which is a little bit tricky. But anyhow, I'll need a piece 5mm by 5mm as that square, and if I chop that in half, I'll end up with a 2.5 by 5. You with me? So this is sort of how you start to think when you're doing the scratch stuff. You know, what's the basic sort of shape that I can build, and then how do I divide that up to get the smaller shapes that I need. So there we go. As I said, 5 by 5. If the vernier had just sort of stopped mucking around, there we go. 5 by 5, and I'm on the thin plastic this time, so it's a lot easier. So back to butter. Butter's better, yep. So cut that little piece out, and then I'll just have to work out half of it. All right, 2.5, that's going to be the measurement, and what I need to do is work out where the centre's going to be. And that's not that hard. I mean, you can just make a little dot in the middle there. It's going to be about right. So, you know, you can eyeball these things. You could do the diagonal trick, diagonal the corners, and you'll get the centre. So with that done, cut those two into half. They're my sides, but I need that little shape, right? That little sort of shape. Now I can't do the double curve, not this small. I couldn't be bothered faffing around with it. So I'm just going to basically round off those two edges, right? This is part of my armchair. So that's sort of easy enough to eyeball it and cut off there. So there we go. Bit of sanding on that. It'll get nice and smooth, and that, for all intents and purposes, will look like what I need. There you go. Done. Okay, moving on, I need to make the armrest, and that's a little U shape, because when I sort of examined all the drawings, I realised it went all the way around. Now, that's a 6mm wide by both directions, so it's a 6mm square. See, again, we break it down in basic shapes. We'll make a 6mm square. That's not too hard to do. I know we've been doing that with all the other things. There we go, 6, spot on. Now, that needs to have a U-shaped cutout in it. How do I do that? Well, first I draw it on there, okay? So I've drawn where I need to cut. And now it's a bit of a delicate operation, because you can bugger them, and I have buggered the odd one doing this. But using a stiff knife, I just push down hard. Got to be very careful you don't bend and distort it too much, but placing it on there, push down hard. Okay, and you see it's bent right out there, but a bit like I can save that one. The final piece here, well, that's got to be a bit of finesse, using the very sharp blade, lightly drawing over it until you've scored enough of a line. And then, here's the trick, lift it up, hold that end, and bend. And there you go. You get the U part out without damaging it. And we have got an armrest. How about that? That's going to be perfect. Now we need to make this bottom piece here. This is the kick plate with a little sort of, you know, meshed area. More about that mesh later. Again, 6mm. This is cropping up a lot, isn't it? No, that's the width. The width all the way through this chair, 6mm. The actual base bit's 3, and the tick plate is 2, so that's 5. So this time I need a 6 by 5 rectangle. All right, so same procedure we've been doing all the way through here. Okay, won't need to tell you how to do this. Yep, there'll be a quiz later. All right, so again, we're making a little rectangle. It's the same procedure every time. Work it out, measure it. It sort of gets monotonous, doesn't it? No, it's actually a lot of fun. And you get quite quick at it because you're just doing the same sort of thing. So what is actually a big complex thing you're making is actually a whole lot of very simple primitives, as we call them. So they're rectangles, they're tubes, they're rods, and you simply just work out what all the primitives are and you go and make them. And when you put the primitives together, you end up with a complex object. And it's as simple as that. So really, it's a lot of planning. If you're not the sort of person that can organise and plan a project, scratch building is not for you. All right, so here we are. A little bit too big. We've only got to take 0.5 mm off on those sides, and that will get us down to the 5. Perfect. Now we need that mark at 3mm because we need the little 2mm edge to kick up. So we've got that little mark. What I'm going to do is I'm going to score that only lightly. I'm not going to cut all the way through. Well, now that I've scored it, right, again, the little trick of holding with the tweezers and bending, and I've managed to bend the entire kick plate up. All right, let's see what we've made. We have that little kick plate with a bend in it, Okay, we've got that. We have the base pieces, the base support, the actual base plate that we made, the side up parts underneath the armrest. We've made those. We have the back of the seat and we have the armrest. We are now ready with all the parts so we can create this seat. Now, I need to divide this up into the sections for each side. And the theory was, and how I managed to do the first one, is I just scored where the joins are, right? And then folded the whole thing up. And that worked perfectly well the first time. See, I just basically fold all those over. Easy as that. And you create a little square by doing that. And then you pop your top into it. Well, this time it didn't work. They all snapped, but never mind. You can still do it individually. You just glue them on one at a time. So that's what I ended up doing. So no real issue there. So glue those little fellas on and they will fit nicely. All the time pushing down, making sure I'm keeping this thing as square as possible. It's so fiddly working this stuff this small, but you just sort of have a bit of patience, take your time, constantly be correcting, try and get it as close as you can. It's never going to be absolutely perfect, but you just try your best to try and get the shape. There we go. With a bit of finagling, we've got a base. Yeah, that worked. Okay, now let's assemble the rest of this. The back of the seat, that's fairly easy to do. Bit of glue on that, and we'll just put that right in the middle, and it sits just in front of those base edge pieces. So you've got a little bit of a ledge there. Same with the side pieces. They will now sit hard up against the edge of the backrest. And they're a little bit fiddly to put on. They sort of kept flopping off and falling off. But we can edit around that so it looks really good, doesn't it? Looks like I know what I'm doing, unless you see the big fingerprint of glue there on the side of it. But they fit on eventually, and like with everything, this is why you use slow glue, finagling. And the little armrest, that goes on and clicks in. Now we leave that all as one piece. Later on you'll see why. Footrest, I found my diamond file was the perfect spacer to get the correct height for that. Now I've got the two seats made, but I haven't put the back piece on one of them. I did it on the first one that you've never seen. So there's a little back brace that goes on there, and that's just made out of some very simple things. I need a tube, and that'll be 1mm. Just some stock rod, and to make the little brackets I just did those with Tamiya tape. So we start off with a tube and it needs to be 6mm long. That's from my diagram. Easy to do that. There we go. There's my tube, measure it up. She's spot on. That'll do. Yep, that'll do. Okay, now the next thing is to bring in the tape, and I just whack a piece of tape down on my cutting mat. Right, and I'm going to make a very thin strip. I need about 0.7 of a millimetre. I'll have to wing this by eye because it's just, it's going to be less than a millimetre. It's slightly over half a millimetre. You can sort of wing it by eye. A very thin strip. So there we go. Peel that out. And that is the strip I can use to make my little shackles. So I push those over the end of the plastic rod. A bit fiddly to get the first one on. Once you've got it in place, it's a lot easier to do the second one. So again, putting that over there and then push them down, squeeze them in. Now I need to just cut them to size. So I removed the waste because I've only got to leave a little bit so it matches that diagram that I had. Again, keeping it nice and tight the whole time. Cut those off. There we go. We've made the little back piece. Look at that. What you can do with Tamiya tape. Now to get it on the back here, I'm going to have to cut a little hole in the back of my armrest. Now I tried making the armrest as two pieces. It doesn't work. It kept falling off. It was too difficult. So I left the armrest as a U, but then cut that little hole out later so I could put in this little back tube. Yeah, that was the best method. So that little tube goes in there, tap it in, and she is all done. All we've got to do now is start the painting. So now those seats are painted, they really start to look the part. Now what we're going to get to in the next video is I will show you how to build these yokes. See? They are tiny. They're made out of 9 parts each. Took me a bit of calculating to figure out how to do them. Okay? At the moment they're just in their dry fit because I haven't got around to painting them. as the seats are just sitting on their blue tack at the moment. What you haven't seen in the video is I found some mesh that I'd bought for the Vespucci, which was supposed to be for the railing, the fencing at the back of it. And I put that in the bottom of those seats because that's what the Stingray has. It has little mesh things there. So that kind of lucked out with that. I trimmed those with scissors and put them in. So there you go. That's it. That's this video. The next video we will make the yokes and the steering columns here, and also I'll finish off the center console because all I've done is made a block for that so far. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you look forward to the next one. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe because that really helps everything. And if you're loving what I'm doing, want to help me out, hit that super thanks. Yeah, I'd really appreciate that. That would be a good thing. All right, well that's it for now. It's goodbye from Australia, and it's hooroo from Harry Houdini.